Welcome to the Bearded Finisher Podcast, your one-stop show for all things finishing and coatings. Your host, Zach, and a variety of industry experts will guide you through the art of perfecting your finishing and business game. From seasoned pros to fresh faces, get ready for tips, tricks, and trends to elevate your knowledge and business to the next level.
Welcome back. This week, we are sitting down with the one and only Mr. Mark Lipton. What's going on, Mark?
I'm doing well, Zach. And by the way, I'm not the one and only. I've been meaning to blog about this and just never got to it. There's another Mark Lipton who's actually a very well-published author. He covers all sorts of business and business ethics and stuff like that. So nice. I'm not only am I not the one and only Mark Lipton, I'm not even the best writer. You know, he's like
we'll say best podcaster because I don't know that guy, but I know yours. So
in the paint industry, I am the top Mark Lipton, and nobody's fucking taking that away from me.
In our wonderful world of coatings.
Exactly, in our space.
So we were kind of chatting a little bit before we hit record, but for those guys that might be new to your world, because I know you and I initially met through messaging on LinkedIn. That's where we kind of started our relationship, and I know this is our first time meeting in person. Well, sort of in person, virtual, sort of,
yeah.
But for those guys that don't know about you, kind of give us a quick rundown of you and where you're at currently and what you're working on with your podcast and stuff.
So I'm mostly not podcasting much at the moment. I do put up content in response to certain things and that I see, like the Gassenheimer situation. But for the most part, I'm living a lot more retired, a sort of an isolated life in Stamford, Connecticut. There's not a lot of people coming through. And if you're trying to do podcasts, you need to be talking to people like all the freaking time, right?
Yes, constant.
And because most say no, and you have to ask everybody to be able to put out with any regularity. And so I do my blog, which I do every week and have been doing for basically my whole life. I used to have it in a magazine before digital took over all the magazines. I had a monthly column in a trade magazine. And I came into the business as an independent paint retailer, which was the magazine's sort of target audience. And I did that for a good portion of my career. It was, probably half of my career, with the rest being on sort of the paint side hustles that we were talking about before. Leading up to this, I've always had a little consulting career, working for dealers who needed help, or working now as an old man. I work mostly as a strategist for sort of C-level executives, but also spent some time as a coatings inspector, working as a NACE coatings inspector for part of my career. So just, sort of a varied experience, but all in coatings. And I sold my stores. They were in New York City. I sold my stores about 6 years ago. And now I pretty much just do my own thing. I'm consulting from home, just sort of handpicking, the jobs that I'm looking for as my girlfriend and I are starting to plan, retirement and shit.
Nice. Well, so we'll take it back just a minute. Are you originally from Connecticut? Where'd you grow up?
So I'm actually originally from the Bronx, New York, and that's where my family's stores were. My great-grandmother opened up a paint store in the Bronx in 1907, which I always find interesting because she wouldn't earn the right to vote for 13 more years. But nonetheless, she opened up a paint store. And I even remember the stories that family members used to tell about how it was not considered appropriate for a woman to be in charge of a business back then. Nonetheless, she was in charge. And so the act that they would put on is that she would go into the back room and, if she was doing business with a vendor or a customer, she would say, oh, well, let me go into the back and talk to Mr. Lipton, who may or may not have even been there. Right. And she would just go into the back and let him stew for a second and then come out and say, oh, this is what Mr. Lipton said. And
that's crazy.
I know, cool story, right?
That is pretty awesome.
That business, which was never more than 2 stores, that business supported my family for 4 generations. I sold it just because there was nobody left who wanted to
Yeah.
engage in the business anymore. So I sold it as I started to get grayer. But that business, we were a Benjamin Moore and a Pratt and Lambert and a Pittsburgh dealer,
Okay.
amongst others, over the years. And yeah, that business did a great job for my family over a
So
long
when
period
you
of time.
sold it like 7 years ago, you said you guys had 2 stores?
Yeah, we had 2 stores. It was 6 years ago, and we sold them to Janovic in New York City, who's a New York City retailer
Yeah. Yeah.
who already had a bunch of stores. And yeah, since then he's moved them and whatever. I'm out of the business completely, and I enjoyed my career, but I promise you, I don't miss it.
So in the Bronx, grew up in the paint world. So when you were a kid, any like memories of hanging out in the paint store, or did anyone ever actually paint, or was it always on the retail side?
So we were always retailers, and dude, all I have is memories of hanging out in a paint store. I don't have anything else. I don't have anything else. That's why I write. If you look at the volume of words that I've put out over the course of my career, the blogs and the columns before that, and the podcasts and all of that, and it's all about paint because, right, it's the only professional experience that I've had. I've had a variety across the spectrum of it,
Mm-hmm.
but basically my entire professional experience has been in paint.
That is, I mean, that's pretty impressive. I can
And
imagine that would be fun. My father-in-law grew up, I mean, he had a paint company and my wife grew up with that. And I actually bought him out when I got into the business. But my wife says it was just like every summer, her memories were they did a lot of new construction when she was little. And she's like, my memories were I'd go to work with my dad every day in the summertime. And
yeah, every day.
I was the best nail hole filler in the world. I would just get a wad of Crawford's wood putty and he would stick me in a bedroom with the baseboards and say, start here and don't stop until you come back to this point.
So I used to go in with my father all the time, and I've often made the joke in my writing that my family smells like paint thinner. Here's why. When I was a kid going in to work with my father, still had the solvents were still sold in bulk. So a guy could come in with a cup and say, like, give me a quart of paint thinner. They had these gas tank type devices in the back of the store. One had naphtha,
Uh-huh.
one had denatured alcohol, one had paint thinner, and the other had lacquer thinner. And if you didn't have a bucket, we had a couple of extra ones there. We never threw out empty milk cartons. We never threw out any plastic containers or anything like that at home. But most people brought in their own. And, it was not an exact science. You'd lay out, 20 little sort of milk things on the floor. You just hit this thing and just run them from one to another. My father would be walking around smoking, and
Yes.
you'd never allow anything like this.
No, it couldn't get away.
Now.
Before I got
No,
into the
but
paint industry, I did a bunch of construction. I mean, ever since I was in high school, summers was always doing construction. And one summer I was working for a guy who did painting and we were painting a car dealership. And I distinctly remember because I was just doing the grunt work, and they painted a whole bunch of doors on this floor, the second floor room that they were like, it's just an extra room. We're not going to do anything with it. So all the doors they painted in there, sprayed them with lacquer. 3/4 of the way through the finishing project, they decided, oh, we're going to use this as a training room, but we just want to finish the concrete. We'll just overspray all over the concrete. So there was 3 of us. The boss man's name was Russell. He just gave us 2 5-gallon buckets of lacquer thinner and said, go up there and clean the floors. So we just go up there one morning, rags, paint, get a box of paint rags and a couple pails of lacquer thinner, crack those bad boys open. And it's probably a 50 by 50 room, maybe 50 by 100. And we're all just on the floor, just pouring lacquer thinner on there and scrubbing it. He comes in there about 11:30, opens the door and goes, holy shit. And we're all leaning up against the wall. And he's like,
drunk.
are you guys alive? Get outside. And we're all like,
Yeah.
what's up? I mean, today OSHA would just have
Yeah.
a field day with that. But I mean, that's just the way it was.
Yeah.
I mean, and like paint manufacturing, I remember when I was in the manufacturing, I was talking to the old school chemists, and you probably can attest to this, before they decided lead was bad and it was in paint, and they're towards the end of the beginning of no more lead in paint, those old school guys that were all in their 70s, these guys would tell me and be
They
like,
refused.
no, we just send the new guy to the whole hardware store and buy as many thermometers as we can, and we're over here breaking
dump 'em out.
thermometers to get the mercury out while there's a cigarette hanging in your mouth.
The painters that would come into my dad's store in the morning, their eyes, even in the morning, their eyes would be red. When they came in the afternoon, they would be watery and running, and they would stay like that all day. The lead was right maybe in the 70s, so I was a kid, but I was already working in the store when they started taking control of VOCs. And now, sort of like about as bad as you can get a product in sort of your run-of-the-mill architectural paint store is probably 250 or maybe 350 grams per liter of VOC. But at the time, they didn't even measure VOC. They didn't even know what it was. If it was 3,000, if it was 4,000 in a can. And my father, when he would open up the cans to tint them, he would put his cigarettes out in them, thinking it was just fucking with me. Cause I would be like nervous. I'd be like, Dad, you're going to blow this fucking place up. And he'd always be like,
oh my God. Yeah, fine there. And put it out. I mean, the times have changed in the paint world. I mean, the stories that I hear from the manufacturing side, and like my father-in-law, talking to him, he's 73 this year. I'm still trying to get him because I want him to come and do an episode. And the stories that he has about business ownership and entrepreneurship are phenomenal. But just the stories, of hiring painters, it was common. Like, you would go from a job site and come back, and you would hire a guy, and they would come to work. And then if it was payday, there's probably about a 20% chance they were coming back after they got their paycheck. I mean, just how bad it got. And then it started getting a lot better. And we're kind of where we're at today, which is so much different than what it was. I mean, good and bad. I mean, some of the regulations I think is a little good, but some of it just kind of hinders a lot of it. But that's a whole nother topic of discussion.
Right.
So go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I was just going to say, what led you to decide, trying to think how to word this, because I know you and I really got to know each other when a lot of the Kelly Moore was going on, because I kind of caught a good portion of that when I was in manufacturing. And
that's when I really became viral. My career didn't change any, but in terms of how many people were following me on digital and following my podcasts and stuff, that's when I went viral. The Kelly Moore stuff really was off the charts.
That Kelly Moore stuff. And so when did you start? Because I know we were talking offline a little bit, and we can I want to circle back to that, because to me, that was one of the big things I wanted to. A lot of people have been asking about, like, industry insight, where things are going. And I'm like, we got to get Mark on, because you've got such a good handle on that. If I remember right, you saw the writing on the wall for this Kelly Moore BS.
So
a good amount of time before.
I was actually in the middle of it. I was in the thick of it. It's actually a funny story. I had been introduced when they bought Kelly Moore. I had been introduced to them through a mutual friend.
Okay.
Like we were talking before, just some guy trying to help out both sides. Senheimer had just bought this company, and he wanted to make a big push into the independent channel and wanted a better understanding of what he had. And somebody said, talk to Mark Lipton, and they made the introduction. And I was going to provide some content, create some content with him, and he was going to pay me a little bit of money. And we started working on a scope and some ideas. And the next thing you know, he's basically looking to buy all of my time for 2 straight years because he wants this big push into the independent channel. And I'm not going to put my name on something like that for, 6 months of work. And
Yeah.
so, right. And so we kind of come to this agreement. We come to this agreement where I'm about to sign this guy over 2 years of my work. And the first project that we were supposed to do together was record a podcast, which I would start working on to prep for their introduction
Yeah.
to the space. And on that podcast, he was such a douche and lied so many times
Really?
that I thought, shit, I can't be involved with this guy. So at the time that was happening, I was starting to hear some things just about his reputation and what was going on at Kelly Moore. And I
Now, is
thought,
Gassenheimer, I want to pause real quick. Is Gassenheimer the
yeah,
guy that was running the PE that bought Kelly Moore? Or
that's
was
right. That's
okay,
right.
okay, okay.
That's who that was. Gassenheimer was the CEO after the Flax Group, which was a private equity firm, bought Kelly
Yes.
Moore. And right as that was happening, I started to hear some things that were, unbecoming about, his reputation and what people were saying about him. And so I thought, I should do some due diligence before I commit to 2 years with this guy. And so
Yeah.
I started to do some research. And it turns out he's a lying motherfucker. He's being sued by the whole planet. There's cases from this other business that he was involved in. There's cases of wrongful death suits against him. He's just this
Jeez.
horrible lying person. And so I texted him basically and just said, hey, I've changed my mind, changed the circumstances. And if you want to know why, I'm happy to take a call, but otherwise I'm good just letting you go via text. And he replied that he did want a follow-up call. And so we got on a call, and I basically, at that point, I had already decided what I was going to do with this story because I felt like I was in the catbird seat. I saw everything. I was up front in the front row, and I was 6 to 12 months ahead on what I knew was going to be a very large news story.
Yeah.
And so when we got on the phone, I basically reiterated the same thing. I'm not going to tell you anything. Have a nice day. And I ended up holding that tape, not knowing what to do with it until a year later when he blew the whole thing up. And at the time that he blew the whole thing up, I had had a year to start investigating and to make myself really well connected in that company. I do a lot of real journalism
Yeah.
as part of the work, and people trust me. I understand the First Amendment, and I got people talking, and it all just worked.
I mean, that was everything that went down because I was in the manufacturing side when all that shit hit the fan. And
Yeah.
it was, I mean, there was old rumblings about Flax Group, and it just, I don't want to throw anybody under the bus that, sources I had when it was going on. But, guys were just start talking about the Flax Group, and then there's all that stuff coming out. And I knew a lot of the store managers being that I'm in Texas, and besides
Right. Oh,
California,
right.
their largest market is Texas.
That's where they are.
Yeah,
Yep.
I think Texas might have been bigger market. And
They were very big in
yeah.
Texas.
Very big. I knew a lot of the higher ups, and man, when it went south so fast. And was it you that posted the article that within like a week of shutting down the company and just firing everyone, Friday's your last day or whatever? I remember that whole deal. Was it you that posted the article that he like went and bought like an island or something within like a week of all this
Yeah.
happening?
I was covering him. I was covering him quite a bit. I was giving him a tremendous amount of shit. When that whole thing was over, you could not Google his name. When I was done with that for a year of that, whatever it was that I was pursuing that story and putting out that content, when I was done with that, you couldn't Google his name without me coming up. It was not possible.
But I mean, on the positive side, I'll say a lot of independent dealers really, if you were an independent dealer and Kelly Moore was competition for you in your market, I know a lot of them that were Benmore dealers that really came out smelling like a rose in this deal. I mean,
Yeah.
because I mean, their
All the ones in
stores.
California, that whole market just
Yeah.
that was tremendous
Well, like,
opportunity for
and
Kelly Moore, Ben Moore, Dunn Edwards,
yeah.
all of them,
And well,
even
here in Texas,
Sherwin-Williams.
the independent Benmore stores, like I know one when I was living in Waco when it all went crazy. And I knew I did some training for the guy down there. And he went over to the guy that owned the building where they had been for like 40 years in Waco, Texas. And the guy who owned the building's like, they owe me like 6, 7 months rent and all
Right.
this stuff. And everyone knew that as the paint store. So he was like, what if I take over the lease and I'll move my store? And he goes, yeah, you can have, they told me that my payment is everything in the store. He's like, I don't know what to do with it. You can have it all. He got a fully stocked store that he liquidated
Yeah.
and it was
Yep.
pure profit. And there was like 3 tent machines and no
Dunn
one ever
Edwards
showed
did
up
the
to pick
same
them.
thing.
I
Yeah.
mean,
Dunn Edwards did the same thing. Benjamin Moore retailers, Sherwin-Williams. I knew of one person who told me that when they got access to the Kelly Moore store for the first time to take it over in a way that you're describing, that there was still cash in the register and the safe. So what fucking stupidity, right?
I
But
mean, I
here's
just
the
don't understand that.
here's the thing is it wasn't stupidity. It was by design. They looked at it and they decided that there's most in it for them if they just shut it down. And so they did.
Yeah.
They just shut it down
They shut it down and
and
they ended up selling they were leasing
they
the
sold the
factory to,
property.
yeah, they were for a while there because we went and looked at it because they did a huge auction of all the equipment. So the company I was
Right.
with, we went down there and said, hey, well, let's go see what they got. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe get something
They've
good and
sold
make
it to
sure.
a Mexican concern.
Yeah, they were actually rented it to SW for a very short period of time because SW, their facility in Texas, caught on fire.
They had that fire there. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's right.
and then they got shut down because there was a bunch of OSHA violations. So
Oh,
they ended up renting it until they got theirs fixed up, and then they were going to sell it, and then they ended up selling it to a company out of Mexico that manufactures some sort of wood coating and metal. They do like industrial coatings. And
yes. I heard that. I heard that they had sold it, but I don't follow along. You know, I was doing that mostly because the stories that I was hearing from the employees that have been injured by him were just horrible.
that's just
And
crazy.
it wasn't just that he fired them all. He was a douchebag to them with intention. So like, for example, a lot of the sales reps that I were talking to were in similar circumstances in that they had cars that they were leasing that they were using for work that Kelly Moore was reimbursing them for, so that when they lost their job, they lost the payment and the right. So they didn't have the reimbursement for the payment. And they also lost their job. So they didn't have any need for the car, but they still had the lease payment.
Yeah.
And yeah, so they really, really just screwed a lot of people,
Oh,
right? A
yeah.
lot of a lot of the ones I was talking to, you know, they had bigger cars, they're dropping off paint for customers, they have pickup trucks, they're $700-800 a
Yeah.
month.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden you're unemployed and you still got that payment.
Because they didn't
Yeah,
do it.
he was.
They just did a
Yeah,
reimbursement, an auto reimbursement.
that's right. They just did an auto
Yeah.
reimbursement.
Well, and then you've
And
got stuff
so I was
still.
really pissed,
Yeah.
right? That's what I was just really pissed about what he was doing. And it sort of incented me to do all of that.
Well, I feel like, I mean, that's kind of, I'm curious to jump into the PPG thing and get your take on that. But there's some other acquisitions before we jump into that one that I kind of wanted to, like the Miller Rada deal. That was an interesting, I mean, I say that, but I remember meeting the CEO of Miller Paint a couple of years ago. We, long story, we did some stuff with them and prior to me coming on, there's some stuff, whatever. building relationships, doing some repairs, whatever you got to do. And we met the CEO at, can't remember if it was an all pro event or I think it was an all pro event. And
That's where they're all hanging out.
oh yeah, and walked away from that event and that conversation. And I was just like, he had just come on and I was like, I don't know if he's there to build the company or to sell it. Cause he was saying, I mean, everything he was saying was to build, but everything he was saying was lean it, increase the EBITDA, stuff like, when you're going to sell. Like, I mean,
Right.
it was an
Well,
interesting conversation. And then to find out they ended up selling to, I would say Rada/Cloverdale. I thought that was a
Cloverdale,
very
yeah.
interesting
And
merger.
that was just before all of the tariffs. And so now I even wonder if that deal looks as good for all the parties as it did before. But, there are good businesses and the mergers I find to be, the continued consolidation I find on the one hand to be, very sad in that it always costs jobs. It always takes money out of local economies. But I think that, it's efficient. And at least in this country, if you wanted to have a conversation on whether or not I thought we should do it like this, that would be another hour. But in this country, that's how we do it, right? This
Yeah.
is, sort of unfettered capitalism. And so if somebody can buy up, and I don't say that in any way to denigrate any of the parties, this is happening in this entire industry.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've made that comment a couple times. Like, I feel like, well, there's a ton of acquisitions that have just happened in the last, what,
Yeah.
2 years?
Yeah.
Mergers,
Richards and,
acquisitions,
yeah.
in the last 2 to 3 years, it seems like there's been a ton of them, but I feel like
Yep.
there's still quite a bit more to come. And rumblings that I hear, I pissed a bunch of people off when I got it from a very good source that Circa was looking to sell their European coatings company.
I don't follow them.
And they were looking, it's a family-owned company in Italy, and I think one of the brothers passed away that was running it, and then they went back to the dad, and he's older, and he's like, "I'm done." So they were entertaining selling, and the number one suitor that went to him and said, "Hey, we'd be interested," was SW Europe, whatever they call that division, picking them up. Like they're picking off all the guys over there in Europe between
Yeah.
ICA and I mean, they're going after everyone, but that one stirred up a bunch, and I've heard that they're still in talks, but I haven't been able to really confirm anything if they're gonna sell or not.
When I first came into the business full time, it was 1988, and the sort of common knowledge at the time, the common belief at the time was that there were somewhere between 800 and 1,000 paint manufacturers around the United States, depending on how you sort of termed a handful of specialty
Wow.
guys, right?
Yeah,
And so I don't know what that number is now. I don't track it all that closely, but I'd estimate it at half, right?
easily.
Maybe a little
Yeah,
less than half. When I was a kid in my father's stores, I used to go pick up paint as needed from various manufacturers. There were 3 I can think of now in the Bronx, one in Brooklyn, they're still there, one in Brooklyn, not to mention several all around New Jersey and other parts of the metropolitan area. There was paint manufacturers in Yonkers, big ones. And all of that has basically been merged into bigger and bigger
yeah,
entities. This one that I just mentioned in Yonkers was Insulex. They were one of the largest
yeah,
drivers of primers in our market for decades. And, they were bought by Benjamin Moore, and Benjamin Moore doesn't need a manufacturing facility in Yonkers. They could make another 1,000,000 gallons in their plant in Clifton or wherever they were making it at the time. And so that just goes away and it gets absorbed basically into these bigger ones. And I think that's going to continue to happen
yeah. We
as regional manufacturers will be the next sort of
yeah.
wave. Sorry,
They're
you
they're
clean that up.
no, there go. I was in a trying to think of the name. It's another co-op like All Pro, but it's for manufacturers, and we
Color
joined it.
Guild.
Yeah, the Guild CPO. We were in the Guild CPO.
Yep.
We joined it.
Color Guild. Yep.
I love the Guild. I love the guys running the
Yeah.
Guild CPO. Great guys. Really got along with them. But getting to see all the regional manufacturers, I thought was, as a boy growing up in Oklahoma, when I did, you always had SW. And in Oklahoma, Texas, Arkansas, even up into Kansas, I grew up in the world of Spectrum. So it was all Spectrum paints by the time I was in the business. But even then, it was all Benmore, PPG, and SW. That was it.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
really all you had. You had we had Anchor Paint
Sherwin
in Oklahoma.
bought Duron. Sherwin bought, I think it was Sherwin bought MAB when I was a kid. There used to be brands, like there were brands in Baltimore. There were brands in Philadelphia. Bruning was a brand in Philadelphia. I just told you all these brands in New York, right? And all of these brands have been absorbed over the years. And it's not just the brands that are absorbed, it's the manufacturing facilities and everything that goes along with it.
When they sold their house 2 years ago or a year ago, when they moved to Durango, they were in the garage and he had the yard sign from when you're painting a house. And he had some old yard signs, and one of them was, this house was refinished with Bruning paint. I guess they sent him a bunch of, he was like, oh Lord, I don't even know how old that sign is.
Yeah. And so I think that that's going to continue. I started to say before, the next round, and this may be a decade, but the next round, there's a lot of regional manufacturers around the United States. They're doing, nice sales, 50, 100, couple of $100 million. They're big enough that somebody's going to want to come along and find a way to make them more efficient. And of course, you mentioned before, there's all the uncertainty, at least in the dealer segment and in architectural coatings, just around what's going on at Pittsburgh at the moment, which continues to be, dramatic.
It seems like it just keeps getting a little bit worse.
Yeah. I think it's basically the same story as Kelly Moore, only with a slightly more polite owner. And so rather than wanting to take on the troubles that come along with being the sort of dick that Gassenheimer was, which is, I'll put myself into those troubles, but that's not what I'm referring to. I'm talking about he was sued a dozen times and, like just that. They seem like they don't want to deal with any of that, but I still think they're going to keep closing and selling until they get down to nothing. They're offering what they have in the way of assets, in terms of brands, in terms of manufacturing and distribution facilities, and really anything else that they can monetize in any way has been offered, across the spectrum of prospective purchasers within the paint industry.
Yeah.
So every region, every type of store, everything has been offered for sale, every facility, all of it. And it looks like the idea is to close down the stuff that's really hurting them. Maybe see what's left at the end. There are some segments that I think have some possibility for profitability. Their dealer segment, I've said many times, is probably profitable for them.
It's interesting. I want to jump into that. I want to, let's grab a quick break, refresh drinks, have a quick restroom break, and then I want to dig into that a little more, in particular with the private equities, and get your take on that one. And then also I want to pick your brain about the PE that bought like Richards, and they're smaller private equity, but they seem to be out there hunting for brands a lot more. And I don't know much about them. I was going to see if you knew anything about them and how they're doing.
I'll share what I know after we come back from the break.
Let's take a quick break and we'll be back.
Do you want your brand in front of the people who actually move product? Painters, finishers, and manufacturers? The Bearded Finisher podcast has pulled in over 75,000 downloads and reaches across the entire finishing supply chain, from job site to manufacturing. From single episode sponsorships to social media promotion, we offer flexible options that get your brand noticed. Real reach, real results. Visit thebeardedfinisher.com and let's get your brand front and center.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Let's dive into. I'm trying to think of the name of the private equity that I want to say bought Richards, but a lot of the guys from Richards ended up working at the private equity. So I don't know if it was like a merger of equals or what. Help
So
me
at
understand
the time
that
at the time that happened, it
one.
looked like a private equity firm popped up out of nowhere
Yeah,
and was
literally.
suddenly staffed with a handful of former Pittsburgh senior level executives and a lot of money. And they bought Richards. At the same time that they announced that they bought Richards, they announced that they bought some sort of small specialized industrial manufacturer,
Didn't they
as I
buy
recall,
Tanim?
but no, not Tanemic
Not
that I'm
Tanemic.
aware of.
What was the other company? Yeah,
Not
I know.
Tanemic.
I know there was another one that they did buy too.
Yes, I remember following the announcement and I reached out to them. They weren't interested in the publicity. And so that's cool. I don't really know much about them except to say that it's not so unusual. What's happening at Richards is private equity is, invading, if that's what you want to call it, but at the very least infiltrating our industry, and it's having a significant impact. We see that already in the Kelly Moore situation. They're a $350 million company, and the Pittsburgh situation, I'll put them at maybe with their stores and their dealers and the home centers, maybe two and a quarter billion or something like that. And that is all being disrupted by basically the handful of people that are just trying to walk away with that money. That's what private equity, I find anyway. That's what I find private equity is, at least the ones that have come into the paint business. I work for this one company who's owned by private equity, and they have a decidedly different perspective than most that I know of in private equity. And so they think strategically and they tend to be innovative and invest. And their private equity ownership is patient and allows for that. But most private equity, I find, are more along the lines of what happened at Kelly Moore or what happened at Pittsburgh and the others. They're looking for ways to find the value, wring it out,
Yeah,
leave the debt to somebody else,
squeeze every
leave the
dollar
debt
they
to
can, and then just chop it up.
That's it. Sell the real estate, fire the people, give them all, 20-second severance. And I find what Pittsburgh's doing now to be, like I said right before the break, sort of along those lines, just not quite as a little more well-mannered
Yeah,
than Gassenheimer was. But I think the same is coming. It'll probably, to be more well-mannered, might take a few years,
but
but
like
nonetheless, it's coming.
I was looking it up when I saw the article, and it may have been your article that released on the PE that bought them. So I looked them up, and they don't really have any, what's the word I'm looking for? History, I guess is the right word to say, in the coatings industry. I think they had
None.
one that was kind of associated with manufacturing, but not in the coatings, like in the subsidiary industry of coatings or something like that.
And I'll give you a little tidbit, see if anybody hears this. Maybe you can go viral. But from the people that I'm talking to,
Yeah.
and I've spoken to a large number of people that have met with the team from AIP. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. AIP.
Generally speaking, everybody has the same thing to say, which is, politely, I'll say, the evidence of their inexperience, as you're talking about here, is overwhelming.
I mean, coatings manufacturing, I don't think is something that anybody can get into and think
You
that
can't just buy a coatings man. Like
no.
they bought it and they didn't even realize the disaster that Pittsburgh had wasn't going to go away when they bought it. It was only going to go away if they took positive action
Yeah.
to repair the problems that Pittsburgh had made. And that's going to cost them money. And I look at their portfolio online. They sort of have an average lifespan of about 5 years that they hold a company for. That's about how long it'll take probably to break up Pittsburgh and sell what pieces. I think some of the paint infrastructure, the factories and the distribution centers are probably dropping in value at the moment due to overcapacity.
I
Sherwin-Williams, Benjamin Moore, they've all added capacity.
I just can't figure out why, because it was my understanding, and from people that I've talked to and some of my sources have said that their plan has seemingly stacked up to be want to get into the AIP thought they could create another Benjamin Moore. All
Yeah.
independent distributors, they wanted to get out of retail 100%, and they were looking at some of the bigger independent
Half their
distributors.
stores are unprofitable.
Yeah, and they suck at retail. They're paint manufacturers. They're not retail stores. So they were trying to dump all their retail stores and basically sell them out to whoever they want. But all the people that would be interested in the retail stores would have only been interested for the access to the industrial coatings.
Right,
Because that's what everyone wanted, is their industrial coatings. They can give two shits about their architectural paint.
And it's not just that problem that they had. It's also that the people that would want their brand, for example, independent paint retailers, might have interest in their brand for any one of a number of reasons, as an alternative where Benjamin Moore is not available, or even where Benjamin Moore is available, as a strategic sort of ally against, just having one vendor, which is, sort of always risky.
Yeah.
But they can't access that business as long as the brands are still available in Home Depot and their own stores, because why the fuck would a dealer want to invest in their
you can't compete
paints that you can buy cheaper down the street because they make a better, seriously.
You cannot outbuy, or you can't outsell those big box stores. And I know that's the whole purpose behind All Pro and putting these guys together. But even at that buying power, like if you're an independent paint store in a town, maybe has 15,000, 20,000 people, for instance, my in-laws live in Durango, Colorado, and we love to go visit them. Big tourist town, very small living population. They don't have a ton of people that live there, but there's a Home Depot and there's a paint store called Ruff's, and they're independent. I want to say they're selling the guy that's I can't remember what they're selling, but I talked to the guy. They used to sell PPG, and he's like, I had to dump it. Like, I couldn't get anywhere near the price. It was just sitting, and I could not do anything with it because 2 miles that way, they can go to Home Depot and talk to the rep there.
That's right. They put reps. I mean, seriously,
they put reps in all the stores, and like, I can't. They're giving you a 20 to 30% discount if you buy 3 5s. How am I going to compete with that?
And the independent channel, to a large extent, had built a lot of the business for the Pittsburgh commercial lines, which are still a lot of their meat and potatoes, and the 670 line and the 6411 and those products, the Speed Hide, I think.
God dang, called Speed Hide.
Right? Those products were made into the sort of muscle items that they are, volume items that they are, by independent retailers who were using them, as I said before. Some maybe strategically, as an alternative. So they just picked up some business that way. But also those products are not, respectfully, because, I have a long relationship with Benjamin Moore, but Pittsburgh does an outstanding job in that category, or they always did, in those commercial products. And so a lot of Ben Moore dealers, including myself, a lot of Ben Moore dealers made bank in the 80s and 90s, creating the market for those products. And then you go and take them and sell them in Home Depot and give them sales reps and everything. I mean, listen, I don't have anybody to cry to, so I'll have to take the hit, but I'm not going to be giving you guys any more business.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. I mean,
Right.
and then someone,
And they're going to have to untangle that. If they don't untangle that, who the fuck's going to want any of it?
yeah, I mean, I wouldn't even want the stores.
Well, the stores, it's very unfortunate. I feel bad because I know there's people that are going to listen to this that work at PPG stores now, or Pittsburgh stores, I guess you call them now. They're going to lose their jobs,
Yeah,
right?
that
Half
is
the
the
stores are not
yeah,
profitable and they're going to have no choice but to close them. They don't have buyers for them. They're still making offers, and there's lots of different ways to split a hair. And so they're trying
yeah,
to find one that works and maybe sell some, from my understanding. But listen, the unprofitable ones, who the hell
yeah.
is going to buy them?
Well, I mean, when I was in manufacturing, I was up in McKinney, Texas, was interesting because I would always like to go talk to the paint stores, and whether we're getting colors to match or we're playing with stuff and we want to compare products. There was an SW store not 5 miles from our facility. And it was easy to go by there if a customer's wanting a specific color, or the lab was wanting, hey, go give me the swatch. We're testing our color program and we just want to see how it compares. So you go pick up this SW store, and at like 7 in the morning, I mean, there was, without fail, every morning, at least 15 people in that store in line waiting every morning, balls to the wall. Not even a half a mile around the corner, there was a PPG store.
Yeah.
You could hear a cricket fart in that store
Yeah.
anytime you go in there, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
"What are you guys doing?"
There was, I lived a bunch of years ago in a tiny, tiny town in northern Westchester County called Katona, New York. I don't remember the population, 5 or 6 thousand people.
Oof.
It's, there was in a town off the beaten path, there was an off the beaten path section of town. And I lived there for, I don't even know how long before I found out that there was a Pittsburgh store there. Somebody told me. And I went over to take a look. As soon as I heard about it, I went over to take a look. And it was, like I said, it couldn't have been, if it was hidden, it couldn't have been hidden any better if they had made the effort. And the first time I went there, it was just, the door was locked with a sign on the door, like, be right back. I waited around for a half an hour and nobody came. And so I went home and tried another day, and
Man.
yeah, and went inside and actually spoke to somebody and realized that I had had a better experience when I just read the sign that said, be right back. And, they just never had a lot of success
Yeah,
in their own stores, right? They
never.
don't have a message that attracts customers. They have the ability, they've specialized in making good products that fit market segments really well. And they've done an excellent job in that over the decades. And so they've got a few spaces
Yeah,
where they do well. But their problem, as I see it, pardon me, one of their problems, as I see it, is that they're almost like a throwaway brand, right? The Benjamin Moore dealers that buy Pittsburgh, they can buy whatever they want from Benjamin Moore, or somebody else will come in and fill them out. There's good regionals all around the United States.
well, it's like, I mean, I'm not the hugest proponent of it, but if I'm AIP and a strategic moment, I'm looking at this going, hey, we've got the formulas to 6-410, 411, speed hide, what everyone's putting on. It's probably on 99% of hotels and hospitals in
It's
the
on
United
the spec,
States.
right?
I mean, it's everywhere.
It's on the spec. That's the
Yeah.
part that somebody's going to figure out. But here's the thing, is that on the spec part is only worth a certain amount of money. You're not going to buy 700 paint stores, half of which are unprofitable, to get on the spec. You're not going to take over uh, uh, an independent retailer channel that's fragmented and losing market share and
Yeah.
poorly managed from their perspective, right? You're not going to be able to do that. And the same thing is true with their like big box segment.
Yeah, well, I'm
right?
like, why would you not be going to me? I'm looking at it going, and this is just me. As I the guy that I used to work for before, the CEO of the company, always say I love it. It's like when I'm just talking out my ass, I'm like, I'm just spitballing here. I'm no marketing genius, and I don't run a multi-billion-dollar company. But I'm like, w- why don't you put some marketing into the big box retailers? Go after SW in that market, and then in the independent channel, it's a label. Why don't you have
Yeah.
a marketing team work on private labels for some of these larger but still independents and just private label it so you're not competing against
Yeah.
the
They
big
just
box
don't get
stores?
that.
I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't.
They never got that at Pittsburgh. They never understood that there were limitations. Of course, you'll do business. I'll sell some 670. I've got some customers that like it. It makes a few dollars. But, long term, unless I believe that I'm protected if I build a market for you, I'm not going to build a market for you because I'll go find somebody else. And like I said, in the case of Pittsburgh to retailers, I wrote something about this a couple months ago. And as it relates to Pittsburgh and independent retailers, they don't really need Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh could go away, and that whatever that segment is, 200 million, 400 million, I don't even know. Whatever that piece is, it's just going to disappear. It'll be all gone. Benjamin Moore will get most of it, but other people who sell, Dunn Edwards will get a little on the West Coast, and Vista will get a little bit in California, but
Yep.
otherwise it'll
Rhoda
just go
Miller get a little
away.
bit up and pee into.
Don Miller will get a little
Yeah.
little piece, pardon me, in a little bit in the middle of the country, but the rest of it is just going to go away.
So do you
And I feel the
attribute
same way
that?
about the Sherwin-Williams, by the way. Excuse 1 second.
No, no,
I,
go ahead.
I, I feel the same way about, you were saying before about trying to go after Sherwin-Williams and the home centers. That is a market segment that is not going well for the home centers, is
Nobody.
DIY
Yeah.
paint. DIY paint is really struggling for the home center. So less and less of an opportunity every day there. A lot of that business is going to independent retailers. And it's also so low margin
Yeah.
that Pittsburgh now, in their new configuration as just Pittsburgh Architectural, they really don't have the ability to compete with Sherwin-Williams in that space anymore.
I
They
mean,
just cannot make those products efficiently enough anymore. And
yeah.
so it's
When you
likely to
say
be a
that, it
money
makes sense.
loser.
Yeah, it makes sense because if you think about the market of, I mean, if you throw the correlation to restaurants, like the Generation X, YZ, whichever one we're at now, I don't even know anymore. But like the big chain restaurants are losing to the small restaurants because people
Yes.
are seeing the value and the whole marketing push of shop local, shop at small, don't go to the big retailers, go to small hardware stores. They're all independently owned, whether it's True
Yep.
Value, Ace, Benjamin Moore.
Yep.
I think that has been a huge help for those guys. And you say that, and I'm like, yeah, you're right. I mean, you don't see a ton of paint getting bought at the big box stores anymore.
And it's shrinking,
Yeah.
particularly to that segment, the DIY. It's shrinking. And you mentioned Ace. Ace is growing, and that's their customer, and Ace is
Yeah.
growing. So I assume that some of that is going to Ace retailers, some of that is
Yeah.
going to Benjamin Moore. But
Was that not one of the
the
best strategic moves Benjamin Moore ever made?
that was right at the time that I was going to work for Dan Calkins, who's the CEO of Benjamin
Yeah.
Moore, was right as they were getting in with Ace. Dude, that was freaking exciting.
Now,
That
I
was
know a lot of the
that was so
independent
much fun.
guys were pissed at that. I understand that and I can accept that. But as a corporation, that was freaking genius.
That was so that was some of the best good fortune and an outstanding decision, in my opinion, by Dan Calkins. He was brand new on the job at that time. he had been like the chief operating officer or president. I don't know what he was before they made him CEO. He, when right before after they knew they had a deal, I had just sold my stores and he called me into Montvale. I just blogged about this recently. He called me into Montvale and he made a presentation to me, him personally. I'm sure he didn't write the PowerPoint, but he gave me a PowerPoint presentation where he went through basically why they were getting into bed with Ace. And the pitch was basically this, that the customers that are currently serviced by Benjamin Moore retailers and the customers that we're going after with Ace are completely different customers. And that with very limited exceptions, there would not be any injury to existing Benjamin Moore retailers. And then he went on to lay out all of the data. And I was super impressed. With him. And I remember, like thinking like this is kind of a cool time and feeling like I might have something I want to say or be involved in that. And so I started talking to him right away. We didn't really know each other that well at that time. We had met maybe over the years at an All Pro show or something. I don't even remember, but we were not like friends or anything like that. But I recognized that opportunity. He was going to need a communicator, somebody with expertise in talking to dealers, and he was going to try to take off a very, very, I don't like the way this sounds, so I'm going to ask you to cut this, but he was about to make a very difficult decision that was going to require, a lot of what I felt was my expertise as a communicator. And so I got excited and I started throwing him opportunities to sort of how I could help and like proposals for scopes of work and stuff like that. And I ended up working for him. He hired me right at that time.
Wow.
Right at that time, I started right away working on stuff as it related to the transition with Ace, and even advising him on sort of responses to where they would think that they were going to have some problems. I was hearing that there were some dealers shared a wall with Ace stores and stuff. And so now they had a competitor right basically attached to them. But that was just a really interesting time in my career. You don't get that perspective very often. And what was interesting to me is that I had known every Benjamin Moore chief executive probably going back to 1985. And Dan was the first one who would hire me. The rest of them would have squashed me if they could have ever had the opportunity, right? They would have walked across the street. They would have been like, that's Lipton, run away. Dan was the first one who wasn't afraid of me, because I had been writing about Benjamin Moore. I had been covering, before the internet and back when it was just magazines, there was not a way to cover like Sherwin-Williams and Pittsburgh and all these companies. So I basically covered Benjamin Moore just through my experience as a retailer and talking to other retailers. And in the process of doing that, most of the Benjamin Moore chief executives thought I was a bit of a dick because, I'm the type who likes to call out where I think improvements can be made.
Yeah.
And I did a lot of that over the course of my career. And so there I was, talking to Dan Calkins, and I'm like, this guy's really going to hire me. I actually can't believe it.
I think he handled it well. And what I was going to add to that was,
well, I gave him excellent advice.
He handled that very well. So that's awesome. But also, I think it opened the eyes of a lot of smaller independent distributors that said, I can't go into a small town with just a Benjamin Moore. That's going to be very hard to be profitable.
That's right.
And it may not have been with, I know there's some other guys out there that some went with True Value and they do partners. I know that, what's his name up in Chicago, he started doing a decent amount of hardware stores, but that model, JC Licht, that model of opening a hardware store that wasn't selling Walmart paint, that was an actual paint store inside of a hardware store, gave a lot of those entrepreneurs business owners another avenue to make good money in those smaller markets where the only competition, I mean, let's face it, I don't have anything against SW, but
I
if
do.
there's 50 people breathing in a town, they'll figure out how to put a store there. I
Right.
mean, they put them everywhere. And as a Benjamin Moore or an independent retailer, it's very hard to go into those smaller markets and actually be profitable. So being able to partner it with hardware and a partner like True Value or Ace, I
I
think,
know a
and
lot
now
of,
you see a lot of them.
yeah, I was just about to say, I know a lot of dealers that have added Ace, True Value, even there's
Yeah.
other ones. I forget the one in
Monel.
upstate New York, but whatever. And I know that those dealers are very successful adding that. And it's an outstanding opportunity to try to sell more to the same customer, as well as try to expand your customer base. And in the case of Ace, the Ace program for online is really the only one that's working. And so it should be pursued by Benjamin Moore retailers if that's an option, because it's additive for them. It's been an outstanding
Zero.
partnership.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been
It
an
sells
outstanding
paint
partnership.
24 hours. That's what I don't.
Yeah.
And again, this is one thing that SW has gotten right. As when I was a contractor and I had my painting company, I could log on to my SW app. They had an app and they had the online.
Yep.
And it had all my history. I could reorder. I could place an order. And once they got rid of that stupid centralized delivery that they did for however many years that really screwed them up, and they went back to letting the store managers, I mean, it was super easy to order paint and it not get screwed up via text or over the phone by doing it on the app. I mean, I had tremendous success with ordering online. I
And
loved
that's
it.
how Ace is doing it. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's how Ace is doing it. And I wrote not that long ago, 6 or so months ago, that I am actually concerned. I do think that the Ace independent Ben Moore retailer relationship is complementary. As I was just saying
Yeah.
before, I don't believe that they hurt each other. I think that they help each other, in fact. But one concern that I do have for the independent paint dealer channel is what we're talking about now, which is that Ace has been very aggressive in that space. They're
Yeah.
doing extremely well. You know, Benjamin Moore is not doing that.
No.
I don't think that they're going to. I don't think that they're going to offer an app through their dealer with a common sort of platform. They need to.
Well, I think the part of the reason that from all the Benjamin Moore dealers that I used to deal with on the manufacturing side is, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you're with Benjamin Moore, but they don't have a centralized POS. Like you can bring
Yeah.
in a separate POS without having a
Yeah.
centralized POS
Yeah.
point of sale system for guys
Yeah.
that don't, I'm sorry about the acronyms, but that makes it really hard to do an
Yes.
online ordering system when you've got,
Yes.
I don't know how many thousands of distributors and they're not using the same POS, the point of sale system.
So probably the first time I started writing about Benjamin Moore's weakness, due to the fact that they have fragmented back office, right? Every dealer is an individual. It's been probably 20 years. And in my opinion, absent as much success as they've had they addressed that, they would have significantly more.
Yeah.
They would be double the size that they are now, or
I learned
something like that.
from my distributors that I used to talk to a lot and go visit. And again, this is just my perspective as a small wood coatings manufacturer. I'll call it boutique wood coatings manufacturer, and talking to these Ben Moore and go there and just see pallets of paint. I mean, pallets. And it seems to have gotten, I don't want to say, I don't know, worse is probably not the best adjective, but more frequent of pallets of the same thing in the last, I would say, 5 years.
Yeah.
They're offering deals, special financing, or all that stuff. Like,
And
I'm
they
like,
lose in efficiency, I feel.
well, I
right?
think they're
Like,
just
why do you
using the
want to put all
stores
of
as
Yes.
inventory holders.
Yes,
give
they
you-
are.
18 months, no interest. It's just full in our warehouse. I just going to send it to my stores. And when that store's not making money, they sell it or whatnot. It just ends up basically you're selling inventory as a Benjamin Moore dealer. I mean, if you want out of the business. But I'm like, what are all these pallets of paint? And then they'll shuffle it. Like one of them, I was there and he got a call from his regional rep and he said, oh, this guy down in Austin needs, I don't know, 3 pallets of this primer for a big project. You just bought 6 pallets on 0%. They didn't get any of that. Will you sell it to them?
Right. And
Most of the Ben Moore guys are like, okay.
Think about how easy that business would be to conduct for Ben Moore dealers and how profitable it would even be for them if they had a common platform that they were all integrated through, and that included with the manufacturer. I actually, right after the pandemic hit, I ended up losing my job at Ben Moore, the one I was talking about, when they closed their Montvale offices, which is where I was working. And I was a consultant at the time.
Yeah.
And I started working on this project basically to solve this very problem. And I built sort of a POS system on steroids that would be your website, could do your ordering, was connected through API to accounting and HR, et cetera. And my intention was going to be to introduce that to the independent retailer channel because I thought that there was a big opportunity. And I still feel like that opportunity exists. As it happens,
Still there.
I didn't go all the way with that. My mom got sick and I ended up sort of putting the project down and paying attention to her. But I still believe that that needs to exist. I know that there's one company out there who's trying to do something like that, but really, unless Benjamin Moore or All Pro, and even All Pro, it wouldn't be. It has to be a platform that starts with the biggest piece, and that's the Benjamin Moore retail.
That's Benjamin Moore. Like my buddy Chris, our sponsor here for the studio, shout out to Chris Riker over My Paint Buckets, but his program management software that he's created is phenomenal for managing projects.
Right.
And he's got SW in through the API back in where you have this app and his painters can put in what they need and he can put in what he needs, but he can approve it when his lead says, oh, we need this much paint. Here's what we need. He can look at it, make sure it jives with what he decided the paint was needed to be and hit submit.
Approve it. It can go to a store, hit submit. It
automatically goes to the store and the store can send back.
Pick it up. They deliver it, whatever.
It's all built into one app through there and it's all back end and its SW is done. And I'm like, and he wants to do it. Like, he's like, I want more paint manufacturers. He's talking to Florida Paints. I think he was working on something with them because he's in Florida and a lot of new construction are using Florida Paints. But he's like, it would be great, but it's so fragmented in the distributor world.
That's right.
Don't know how to do it.
And
neither
so
do they.
Dan Calkins, when he fired me, made it clear what he thought of my opinion, but I'd give him that opinion now for free. I believe that he's sort of strategically at risk, meaning long-term, I have worries for the prognosis of that channel, of the paint and dealer channel, if they don't address this, if they don't find a way for dealers to play in that space, because Sherwin-Williams is growing very quickly with that app and with digital and online, and Ace is growing very quickly as well. And so who's going to keep the paint and decorating retailers, which is his foundation, right? That's the meat and potatoes of his business. If I had to guess, I'd put him at $2 billion a year. $1.5 billion of it is these, paint and decorating retailers.
Yeah.
And so they'd be out of the game. And so what does that look like in 5 or 10 years? Bad.
I would hope. I mean, you would think. I don't know. And this is me spitballing. Like, you've got a strategic partner, Ace. They're already kicking ass at it.
Right. Figure it out.
Why don't you just go ask them? Hey, what are you guys using?
Right. How do we make this work?
How do we make this? How can I license this and give it to every one of my distributors?
Yeah. And Ace, I don't know if you noticed, they just announced their earnings last week. Their online business was up 18% in the second quarter, and the first quarter was up 35%. So
No, I
they're
didn't even see that.
exploding in this space, right? And I could go back and find you other data. It's been going on for them for probably 2 or 3 years. They've been very aggressive and growing very quickly in this space. And
That's impressive.
so I do think you're right. Like there's this opportunity. I'm not sure why, other than to say, like I said, he stopped taking advice from me. Otherwise, I don't know why Benjamin Moore wouldn't want to do this. It's really a great opportunity for them. So good. I shouldn't even give it away for free on your show. I should be charging them.
Charge him for it. That's what we do, right?
Exactly. The very least, because he fired me, I should at least get something back from it.
There you go. I was going to ask you earlier, and this is kind of one of those, I tend to chase squirrels a lot, but do you think, or what would your opinion on this next statement? The acquisition, and I don't remember when it was, of Berkshire Hathaway picking up controlling stake and then all of Benjamin Moore,
It's around 2000 or 2001.
had a lot to do with, or is related in any way to all these private equities thinking they can come in and run painting companies? Because Benjamin Moore, or because Berkshire Hathaway has, I mean, I know there's been ups and downs for Ben Moore, but overall they've been successful. Berkshire Hathaway has been successful at doing that. Like, do you think that was
Yes.
like the transition to private equity seeing Berkshire Hathaway buy a painting company? So everyone's like, oh shit, let's go find painting companies.
I don't know, but Berkshire Hathaway is using a different model. You know who uses a similar model in the paint business to Berkshire Hathaway is the company that owns California Paint. California Paint is an architectural coatings brand. They make some good exterior products, Storm Stain, and some specialty products,
California
and they
paints,
they have a whole line of that manufacturer under different
C2?
brands. No, I don't know if that's C2, but what they're known for is they're actually specialty athletic field coatings manufacturers. So they
That's
make
right.
the paint for the US Open tennis courts and stuff like that. And they've been accumulating brands over these years and sort of using a Berkshire Hathaway model. But Berkshire basically leaves Benjamin Moore alone. They're completely independent. And the private equity firms that are coming in, they're not doing that. Berkshire is investing. You know, there's somebody that Dan can call when he needs a new manufacturing facility because tariffs have changed the circumstances between the United States and Canada. He has access to sort of all that money as investment. The private equity guys are going the other direction. They're pulling, they're trying to. And so,
Well,
no, I don't think
that's a good
anybody's doing it on their
observation.
model.
That's an interesting, that's a very good observation, that the private equity that's getting into this world, and with the tariffs, I've noticed a lot of European companies. I mean, we're getting more and more of the specialized European wood and industrial metal and glass coatings coming over here, but not just coming over. They're finding strategic partners based in the US and planning on, if they aren't already, bringing manufacturing here.
Right. Well, I think the tariffs have changed, obviously, at least for the next few years, as long as they're held in place. People are going to consider bringing as much manufacturing to the United States as is possible. My fear is that it's a bad plan and that won't happen. But nonetheless, that's the obvious thing, right? If it's going to cost 50% for you to ship it across the sea, then you might as well make it here if you want to access this market. But we'll see if he can force that onto the economy. My own opinion.
That'll be
My
interesting.
understanding of economics is that is not going to work, but that's the effort anyway.
Do you follow the industrial European guys very much?
Not really.
Not really. What
Not really.
I've found it interesting is I've talked to a couple that are looking to come over, and it's such a different market over there. One, it's a way smaller country.
Right.
You'll have 20 manufacturers or 10 manufacturers in a town that all have different customers, but they're all pulling paint out of one town. And it's so much bigger over here. They're like, oh, what's the top selling items? And I'm like, what, where and
Right.
what's
Right.
manufacturing in that area. I mean, it can be anything, but
Right.
you can ship across the whole US. It's just going to take a little bit longer. It's trying to think of how to
Be
word it.
curious how all of this ends. I'll leave you with this for tonight just because it's getting late here. But I would tell you that
Yes.
if you wanted to continue the conversation and record another one, I'll make it easy to schedule it again. But I'm going to go have some dinner.
Yeah.
But I think that the United States is about to learn a terrible lesson
Interesting. How so?
about what happens when you elect a business person to, and frankly, one that I've known my whole life to be a criminal. I remember Donald Trump, committing crimes in the 80s in New York. I think we're going to learn a lesson about the impacts of having, more to the point than his criminality, the having somebody with absolutely no understanding of how economies and finance, fiscal policy, and anything like that works. I think we're going to see it. I am working with one international company now in sort of a sundry manufacturer role. I'm expecting their products in the United States to be 50% higher in a year or two than they are now.
Interesting.
And
I mean, I'll be
I
interested to see how that
expect
plays
that
out.
I expect that to be the case with, I don't know about the percentage, right? That part's a bit of a guess, but it's going to be just about every tool that comes into our segment. China and India account for probably 60%
Yeah.
of the
Of the
market share
manufacturing. Yeah.
of the manufacturing there. And I don't know, even if you said, I wouldn't have the argument on whether or not long term he's playing 5-dimensional chess, right? I'll leave that to somebody else.
That's
But I can
politics.
tell you this, right? I can tell you this, it'll take 5 years to work. And in those 5 years, we're all going to be paying 50 to 100% more for paintbrushes. Now, in my opinion, when the 5 years is up, there won't be any more paintbrush manufacturers in the United States because the United States is deeply flawed in its inefficiencies. The reason why our manufacturing struggles to compete on an international level is, at least as it relates to sort of the bottom of the market. I know chips and things like that, perhaps, but from cars on down, basically, is just the inefficiencies of our system, the quality of our roads, the quality of our air transit. When you go to study and try to understand why the Chinese are winning in the manufacturing war, it's not what we're told here in the United States. The reason they're making cars cheaper than we are is that they pull the steel from the ground, they stamp it into vehicles, they pull the rubber out, they make it all on one 100 square mile facility. They bring in airports, they bring in high-speed trains, they bring in large roads, they bring in housing for skilled workers, to live. And so they're able to accomplish through their manufacturing efficiencies that we're not going to be able to get to here. And so
I mean,
I think the only thing that's going to be left is just inflation.
Yeah, I mean, as someone I've never traveled outside the US, I mean, in Europe, so I can't really speak to a whole lot of that. But I think you can't undercredit the tenacity of the American entrepreneur and the fact that part of the reason I think our system works is because you can go out and say, I've been a firm believer in, just find a problem. You don't see many millionaires that say, I love what I do. No, I saw a problem and I solved it. So what I think it brings, I think this, Trump, love him, hate him, whatever it is, it doesn't really matter. They're all short term. No one's there forever. It changes every 4 years. But what it does bring, though,
my fear is in this case, by the way, that the changes he brought is permanent. If we wanted to spend another 2 hours, I would show you evidence. It's in fact, in my opinion, overwhelming. It's in fact overwhelming. The
it could
evidence.
change. We just, our policies. But I think where I go with that is, and I know you want to get to it. I don't want you to keep too much longer, but where I go with is the amount of opportunity that this brings for business owners and entrepreneurs to say, what's the problem and solve it. And one, bring jobs. So I think it's possible to solve but it's going to take, and I'll be honest, it's going to take people shit ton smarter than I ever dreamt of being to be able to solve the world's problems, which you're never going to solve.
Yeah.
I think there's people out there that can, and I think there's people out there that will. We just got to kind of get out of the way and give them the opportunity.
I hope you're right. I don't see any of them working for us now. I don't see anything like that.
None of them are working in public office.
No,
that's for sure.
On any side of the aisle. And that's the part that concerns me. Even if you feel like Googling things that Tim Cook says about why the iPhones can't be made in the United States, no matter how much Trump screams about it. His biggest problem is that we don't have enough people who are skilled to manufacture the phone. We don't have enough employees to hire.
I'm not going to say that we're
capable, who are capable of doing that work. And that's
the laziest generation.
That's a very big problem. And not just, they lack the education, unfortunately.
Yeah. I would agree with that. I think there's a lot to be said for that.
60% or something like that of all Americans are, basically reading at a 5th grade, 8th grade level. And that's not enough to be able to teach them how to make an iPhone and therefore pay them $50 an hour to do it.
I never really thought about it and put it together until I started listening to, and just on a whim, I ran across Dave Ramsey's podcast, and love him, hate him. He's helped a lot of people.
I don't know who he is.
He does a thing called Financial Peace University, and he teaches people how to get out of debt, stop giving your money to the bank. But people call in on his show and say, oh, here's my problem. And he teaches them, and he goes, all out. And he's pretty, not want to say brutal. He's honest. Like, hey, you're being stupid. You're making $60,000 a year and you're living in a $750,000 house and driving $2,000 a month in car payments. What the hell's wrong with you?
Right.
The amount of financial literacy that is in the United States is one of the most terrible. you're talking grown adults, and you're like listening to this podcast, and you're like, "I'm sorry."
Yeah. And now add on top of that, right? So we already talked about how we're not, as a people, we're not educating ourselves as a society well enough. And we already talked about the fact that our infrastructure and other systems are not efficient enough to compete. But then I add more concerns for us because we're all terribly unhealthy because of the quality of the food that we get here. It's
that's
very
another
bad.
That could go into a what's his name, Joe Rogan 4-hour podcast.
Exactly. And then on top of that, like, after you get sick from the bad food, the medical care here is not very good.
There's a lot of things we could do better. I would not disagree.
Right. Exactly.
Great conversation, Mark. I love digging deep into the business with you. I greatly appreciate you coming on the show. If you guys aren't following Mark or reading his blog, I'm going to throw his LinkedIn profile down there. Go check him out. Follow him. Got some great articles on there. Again, Mark, thank you, sir, for coming on. I appreciate the time, and we'll do it again for sure.
Definitely. Zach, thank you so much. I enjoyed it very much.
Thank you. Hey, you guys make sure you're following and subscribing, and we will see you next week.
And that's a wrap on this episode of the Bearded Finisher Podcast. We thank everyone for joining. Keep hustling, keep learning, and never settle for anything less than your best. Remember, the path to perfection is a journey, not a destination. Until next time.